we just started raising capital. And one thing that I'm really glad we did, we stayed very focused in our market, so we know it well. And we didn't chase the return of the deal. We chased the relationship.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Richer Geek Podcast. Today, I'm proud to have Darin Davis. He's an industry leader, entrepreneur with over 20 years of real estate experience, over 1 billion with a B in sponsored project. He's gone through several major market shifts in the last 2 decades. We all have if we've been in the industry that long. He's led predecessor companies to pivot, delivered exceptional returns on multifamily assets and other types. And we're going to talk all things real estate and how he's dealing with things that we're all dealing with. Welcome, Darren. How you doing?
Mike, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to today.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I'll have to say that today's episode is brought to you by REI Words, your go-to SEO agency for increasing traffic to your real estate website. Check it out at reiwords.com. Darren, give us a little bit about your history background. You know, I want people to get to know you before we start digging into what you know.
Okay. Pretty simple upbringing. Born and raised in Texas. We're all very proud of that. We'll say it 100 times if you let us, but I did your traditional, high school, college, got out of college, took a job in the kind of sales world. And I was pretty successful at selling, just because, I had no other choice. I was just raised by a Marine and a school teacher. You just do it. There's no crying. There's no just go get it, figure it out. And, old school. Yeah. There was no internet, nothing, but, I saw quickly that I was a high achiever, and I saw that I was really performing well for other people. And after 15 years, Monday at 6 a.m. until Friday at 6 p.m., literally felt like 24/7. I just said, you know what? I've got to do something different. And I didn't know what different was. I didn't all of a sudden, read a book or talk to, have a meeting, but I just said, I cannot continue doing what I'm doing. And I kid you not, I am driving from San Francisco to San Jose, and I'm listening to good old AM radio. That's what, we did back there for our education. But I'm listening to a talk show, and I'm fascinated by this guy. I've never heard anything like this. And I get to the parking lot, 10 or 15 minutes before the radio program was ending. And I just sat in the parking lot. I said, I got to listen. Who is this guy? What? And they announced at the very end who it was. Well, this is in 90, I'm going to say 98, maybe 99, 98. And it was Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I know. And I didn't really pay attention to the real estate piece of it. I paid attention to the mind shift. Mm-hmm. And I was fascinated. I mean, hook, line, and sinker. So I got really in tune with understanding different ways to look at, how you can control your life and assets and passive cash flow. I didn't know any of this. My parents were paycheck to paycheck, teacher and Marine. I mean, they got paid twice a month, and that's our life. So that started it. And then a couple of years of really kind of self-education. I just jumped in with both feet and said, I'd done well enough. I had a little bit of money. And then at the time, my girlfriend, which became my wife, we said, you know what, let's go do it. So we both left San Francisco, moved back to Texas, and set up shop. And we started off with a single family Section 8 home. That's how we started.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. It's like our stories are almost intertwined, even though I didn't listen to the AM radio. I actually bought, for everybody that may not know, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the book. That's what his focus is on. And, it's the same. That book can change your life, and that's how a lot of real estate. If Robert could even know, it's like how many lives has he affected on down just by a simple statement on that mind shift on how to change your life. I always say that I want to build a life that I don't need a vacation from. And how do you do that? It's that switch of going from the paycheck to paycheck to, that single family. It just starts with that one place. Now, fast forward, you've done a little bit more than just that one little house.
Yeah, it did some. Yeah. No. So what happened is I just started hitting the street hard, and I ended up meeting a gentleman, and I got to give this guy a lot of credit too. I met him through a friend of a friend. They said, "Hey, you want to get into real estate? This guy Wes over here, he does X, Y, and Z." And I said, "What's a syndication?" And I asked, going, "That's what he does." And I was going, "Well, hell, I don't have any ideas." Anyway, I go meet with this guy, and he says, "Well, the only thing that you can really help me with is maybe raising capital." He says, "Can you do that?" And I said, "Well, sure." And he showed me how I'd get paid, and it wasn't a ton, but I was fascinated by using other people's money. Okay. I was going, wait a second, and I heard that in the book and on the radio program,
Yep.
and here it is in real life. When I did I think we did four single family homes. That was all my money. Yeah. But then when I found out, you can pool money. And so I worked with him, and he let me ride his coattails and learn. But I remember we did one strip center. And these were like B strip centers. We'd lipstick them, paint them, re-tenant, and then sell them 3 years, 4 years later. So 1, 2, 3, that turned into 13 strip centers over the course of the next 4 years. So I got and I didn't make a ton of money, but I did fine. But I got a great lesson in raising capital. I got a great lesson in how to structure waterfalls, syndications. And I got to tell you, if he had said to me, "You're going to work for free for the first 2 deals," I would have done it, because hindsight, it taught me the whole foundation and structure, and all it was me asking a lot of questions and pounding the street and finally getting connected with a friend of a friend.
Yeah. And that is so amazing. And a lot of people, if you didn't get that tidbit, it's not all about the dollar sign. It's about the mentorship. It's about learning, because you can't put a price tag, a dollar sign, on the knowledge that this person gave you. And it's so important, especially to the younger listeners. Don't chase the dollar. The dollar sign will come. Chase the knowledge, chase the mentorship, chase someone like Darren, get involved in Club Capital. And we'll talk about that a little bit, later on. It's all about the networking and just the resources. It's just, and it never changes, does it? Darren, it's no matter how successful we are, it's still, we're seeking that knowledge.
I was on a podcast about a couple of weeks ago, and I learned something that I thought I should have known 10 years ago. And I told the guy, I said, "You know what?" For the sheer fact that I didn't know about that, I am attacking that subject matter right now, because and what it is, it's a different way of tax deferral from 1031s and depreciation, and it's a different concept. I've never heard of it, and so here I am, 61 years old, and I'm still picking up great nuggets of information that I can utilize and I can share. So and let's talk about this coaching tree. Everybody hears about the coaching trees, okay? You hear, I'm going to use Tom Landry as an example, or Jimmy Johnson or whoever, some Dallas Cowboys. But think about the impact that coaching legacy just spreads and that foundation it builds. And guys like you and I that share that with one guy, then it goes to 4 guys, and it goes to 12. And then, that is powerful, that networking and mentorship. And to your point, especially for the younger people, the money's not the most important thing, that relationship and that knowledge, just like you said. I just want to reinforce that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the money will come if you do it right. If you just listen, 100%. It'll listen. I never want to hear a young kid say, "Hey, Mike, teach me this." Why? I want to get rich. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not interested. Go away.
Yeah. You know what another one is? If they come in and ask you, the first thing they ask you is, "How much do you pay?" And I go, "Nothing, leave."
"How much are you worth, Mike?" And I'm like, "You want to learn?"
Yeah, exactly.
because you don't want to know what my hourly rate is would be to
Yeah,
teach you.
they
You
have
know,
no idea. I have no
they have
idea.
no idea what the hourly rate is. But
Yeah.
great story. So let's talk a little bit about what you do now. You have Club Capital, and you're doing some LP work. Talk a little bit about where you're at now and what you're doing.
Yeah. So when I finished the syndications on the retail centers, and I'm going to give everybody kind of what I did and what not to do real quick.
Yep.
I thought I was super smart. Okay. Now let's go back to 2008. All right. 2007. I started saying, hey, I can do this on my own. And I'm ready to, clip the cord and go do it. Now I was okay, but I made a few mistakes. But 2008, 2009, we did our first multifamily development. Now, I say first because I had never done one, but I had purchased a piece of land and I wanted to do it. Well, 2008 and 9, I had purchased the land without having all my entitlements, and then the market crashed. Okay.
Yep.
I've got a term sheet takeout letter for a construction loan by a very well-known lender, and they said, we're going out of business. So sorry, so sad. See you later. And I'm going, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay. I just put, hundreds of thousands of dollars into this. So my point on that is, for you guys thinking about development, you have to have all your entitlements before you go spend a ton of money, period. And we're going to get off that subject. But we did a multifamily development, did another. Now, we're not so much the developers, but we're primarily the LP equity. Now, sometimes we co-develop and sometimes we're co-GP, and that's important, and it all depends on the deal.
Mm-hmm.
But we started working with a network of our friends because they said, hey, what are you doing? We want access to this. Now, Austin's growing, Dallas is growing, Texas is growing. So we were undersupplied in multifamily housing because of the 7, 8, 9, 10 crash that we had. So there was just this, rocket ship of construction and that needed to go on. So we had this good ride, and hindsight, I wish I had taken more advantage of it. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we just started raising capital. And one thing that I'm really glad we did, we stayed very focused in our market, so we know it well. And we didn't chase the return of the deal. We chased the relationship.
Yeah.
We wanted development partners and sponsors to be vetted in the community, not just a one and done or it's flavor of the day. These are guys that have 4 or 5 projects. They have a business. And so we really selected some key partners, and we selected a couple that weren't key, and we got away from them quickly. But my point there is that we started doing LP equity, multifamily with a handful of really good developers, and we had a nice 10-year run, and we've been doing quite a bit all the way up until the last 18 months when numbers just didn't pencil. But now we pivoted, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing there. Yeah. So, but that was it. We did, really well. Texas is great for business. We had a net positive migration. We have jobs. We're just fortunate, we have a good business climate here. But what's happened, and I think everybody knows this to some degree, is that where we are in the market today, interest rates have risen, leverage has gone down. Used to get 75% bank loan, now it's 55, 60.
Mm-hmm.
Valuations have come down because rents have come down. Supply's gone up. So you've got this perfect tsunami. And it's not like when interest rates come down, if they do, in the next couple of years, that's going to fix everything. You've got to have about 3 or 4 of those metrics work for you.
Yeah.
So I tell people today, I think we're in this kind of bottom of the trough now for another 12 months, maybe 18 months. But here's the good news. All right. The good news is that all of these developers that took out loans, 2, 3, 4 years ago on these floating rates, those loans have gone from 3.5% to 8.5%. All right. Mm-hmm. Guess what's happened? They burned through their interest reserve. Well, here's the other thing that's happened. Let's say rents were $2 a foot. Well, now they're $1.70 a foot. Well, guess what? Your income is not as high, but your expenses are still the same. So these guys are going like, you know what? I've got a good project. We're finishing up construction. We're finishing up leasing and stabilization, but I through all my reserves. I need some rescue capital or some capital that's got some high octane oxygen in it. And so that's called pref equity or preferred equity.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is with those select developers that I mentioned that we pick the guys we know, we're coming in and putting these plugs of capital and filling that gap to get them over the goal line. Now, what does that do for the investor? Well, for the investor, they come in and it puts them in front of all the common equity that's currently in the project, and they get a fixed rate of return, usually paid out quarterly and usually around 2 years. So you've got a shorter term investment, you've got a cash flowing investment, and you have a priority over the common equity. And so you're in a really good position to be sitting there going, all right, I've got a Class A asset in Texas or Florida or Arizona, a nice Sunbelt growth state. And, I've got this, 30% of this money or 20% of the money behind me is my safety net. So all that common equity is the safety net. And then behind that is the sponsors promote, so you're really sitting in a good position to get paid. And that could be a one and done if somebody's just looking for short-term, double-digit returns, that's really safe and secure. But here's the little catch that we're kind of working on. We're only funding deals that we would acquire. So we're underwriting them as if we were acquiring them. And that's a very in-depth underwriting process. And the reason why is because if you think about this, we're getting a courtside seat or a front row seat to the asset.
Yep.
And we're getting paid to look at it. All right. So we get to watch the asset management, we get to watch the property management, and we get to see the performance of the asset. And we're sitting there going, you know what? This is an asset we underwrote to own. It's in our backyard. We're watching the asset, getting paid to watch it. We're going to either, in some of our agreements, it's not to go into a bunch of details, but like a first right of refusal that we can and acquire the asset so that the sponsor doesn't have to take it to market for 6 months and pay all the broker fees and. So we're sitting there, we're the Trojan horse with the olive branch. So yeah, that's kind of the part B of it, but that's how we look at it as extra value add and not just a one and done. It could be a one and done, but it could also be an acquisition.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating. It's the first time I've heard of this. There's all these other things. And this is what's truly amazing about doing this podcast is every time I go onto a podcast and I host a podcast, I'm learning something new within my own niche, within the real estate investing niche, and it's just amazing. Now we've hit upon a little bit about limited partnership, investors' returns. Talk a little bit about, for those that may not know, how important is it to diversify and instead of just holding everything and not getting dividends, not getting passive income, they're just kind of sitting there holding things until they're 65 or something like that. How important is it? And I know you have a very personal story on why it's so important, but talk a little bit about the passive income, and just going, it's mailbox money basically, right?
Yeah. The older I've gotten, the more fixated, and I mean fixated on my personal investments and the investments that we offer to our investors. Because you start seeing clearly, you don't have you're chasing these returns and these big unicorns. You're going, you know what? I need singles and doubles. And you start adding them up and you get that compound effect. And in 10 short years, you're going to be in a really cool position to see the cash. I've heard this so many times, and I remind people, when people say cash is king, I go, no. Cash flow is king, period. Okay. Yeah. Just period. Nobody can argue with me better on that. So I'll leave it at that. But I'll share you a little bit about my personal story. So, we came out of that Kiyosaki thing and spent 2 or 3 years, really figuring it out, and then went into the syndication piece. And at that whole time, my wife and I are going, you know what? We get it. Okay. It's going to provide us freedom, not today. We're not going to get rich, in a year or two. It's going to take a decade. But if we do it right, we're going to be just fine. Well, we were following the model. Okay. And and we decide to really build our own business. And then things were going great. And this is where life just happens. It just happens. She was diagnosed with cancer, given 2 to 6 months to live. And we as a family just said, you know what, we're gonna beat that time. Okay, we're gonna beat it. All right. Well, I thought beat it maybe would get us to 6 months. Well, what ended up happening is that I had to virtually leave the day-to-day operations of the business, but I had a great team and we had passive cash flow coming in. So I knew the money was coming in. And what we ended up doing is that second life that we were preparing after the kids go to college and all that. We just took that and went straight after her on the medical side. Okay. And we did not even have to think twice about it. We focused on her. She lived over 4 years with stage 4 cancer day one. The first when we kind of figured out what was going on. And I tell you, I sat back and I watched family after family after family get wiped out because we're in the hospital, virtually every week. And because they couldn't go to work, they didn't have the resources, they were paycheck to paycheck, and everything from losing their house to going bankrupt to all this. And it just absolutely devastated me to see these families just one after another, either two things financially go, just it got lost. Or here's the other thing, Mike, that you're going to get me to go on a rampage here. But when the insurance says, I'll pay for this treatment, but not this one. Well, the doctor goes, well, I want this one. Sorry, we're paying for this one. I didn't have to face that. My wife and I didn't have to face that. We said, we don't care. If the insurance will pay for it, great. Doctor, you want the one that they won't pay for? Yeah, good. We got it covered. And that was 100% because we had spent 10 years building that foundation that we were able to do that and not go bankrupt.
Darin, I mean, that's just a heart wrencher, but also a reminder and a testament about what we try to beat into the heads of everybody that listens to this podcast. Is you just gave the true life story of why we keep beating in passive income and cash flow. And ladies and gentlemen, if for those of you who are listening and the wheels are turning, it's just do it. Get a mentor, get a business partner. If you don't know how to do it, find someone that does, and partner with them and learn from get with Darin and learn from that.
Anybody on this podcast wants to call me, you're going to talk. This is true to my core, my heart. I mean, Mike, everybody listens to this podcast, or I speak at some small conferences and stuff every now and then. But 10% of us have a life event. Okay, I'm part of that 10% on this. Of that. But by the time you're age 60, which I just turned 61, okay, 50% of the people in your audience are going to have that life event. It's going to happen. I mean, the odds are the older you get, the more likely, and the time that you spend today, as small as it may be, compounded over 10, 15, 20 years, life-changing, absolutely life-changing.
Yep, absolutely. So let's shift gears to, all right, everyone wants to get into the passive income. Everyone is like, okay, Darin, Mike, you've talked me into it. I need some passive income. I need to know how to invest with Darin. So Club Capital, talk a little bit about, you go to Club Capital, you click on what and what is the process of getting started or learning information?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've got a couple things on there. We have our current investments, which are on our investment page. And, we have the basic, hey, fill out, make sure you're an accredited investor. And it's like three clicks, name, email on that. We also have a newsletter on there. And we're gonna show a landing page at the end of this that's going to talk a little bit about Club Capital. It's going to be a link connecting you and I together that'll talk about pref equity. What that is, it's like pref equity 101. It's 10 things you need to know about pref equity. And, so if you're investing in that for the first time, but, we're pretty easy to find. We're very easy to deal with. We have a lot of content on there, educational content, which I keep wanting to refresh it all the time, which is okay. But I keep listening to it. I'm going like, that hasn't changed that much. It's been the same rules for the last 20 years, granted, we learned something new, like a nugget, but I mean, the foundational stuff hasn't changed that much. So it's really, there's quite a bit up there, but, I love taking calls. And here's the other thing I tell people, and I think this is super important. You're passionate about what you do on the syndication, and you're in the hospitality or extended stay, the hotel space. I'm in primarily multifamily. All right. But, I tell every young investor, and I say young, I'm talking in the 40s, because a lot of guys, once they become an accredited investor and they're usually not 25, except, I take that back. High tech guys, they're 25. And
some of our listeners are young and have some money.
Yeah. But I tell them, I go, look, they go, well, what do I need to look for? I'm gonna say, you take your money. Let's just say you got 250 grand. All right. And they want to start looking. I said, go put 100 here, 100 with this guy, and 50 with this guy. And you watch the way they communicate with you. Do they do what they say they're going to do? Are they available? Do you really get answers, or do you just get fluff? And I say, you do not want to put all your money with me or Mike or anybody. You've got to go test the waters. You've got time. Find one or two good sponsors. Hitch your wagon to that horse and build that relationship, because I have relationships now that are, I've got a handful of guys that did that first apartment complex we did in 2009, 8, 9, still with me today. And here's the trust factor. When we send them something, they don't even read it. They just call me and say, I'm in. And I go, well, Scott, you ain't even read it yet. Or, Paul, you ain't even read it yet. I don't need to read it anymore. I've been with you for 15 years. I know what you do. Yeah. So that becomes super empowering on both sides of the table.
Absolutely. Before we leave, a couple things. Is there anything that I've missed out in these closing minutes that you'd like to let our listeners know? And then we'll go into the different ways of how they can contact you.
Yeah.
What kind of tidbit?
Well, man, I've got 100 of them, but here's what I'll tell people. I used to say a long time ago, education without execution is just entertainment. Okay. And what I like about that is I get so many people that have this just complete analysis paralysis, just won't take that step. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to make a right decision every time. Okay. I've made several wrong decisions, but I've learned. And taking that first step is just, you've got to do it. And it gets easier and easier and easier because you gain more knowledge every time, and keep it simple. I see so many crazy waterfalls and structures and deals and partnerships.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be that. If it's that complicated and you don't clearly understand it, we'll walk away. And I'm because I'm an older guy, I kid around about this sometimes and a few other things. But you and I know the Beatles, and I think the Beatles have stood the test of time for about 50 years or more.
Yep.
And if I were to tell you this, it's hard to believe sometimes. 21 of their number one hits had 3 chords: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Because it was simple, it was successful. Everybody could understand it. Everybody could relate. Everybody knew what was going on. Whether you were a fan, whether you were a producer, whether you were the musician, everybody was in sync. It was simple. But when you have 21 number hits and you have 3 chords, you're focusing on what really counts and not grabbing at straws everywhere to see if I can make this deal great. And it doesn't work.
Yeah, very good. Darin, where can everybody get a hold of you?
Okay, I love this. You know who Carl Rove is? Remember?
Absolutely.
Okay. Remember, he takes his little board and he writes on it.
Yeah.
He sticks it up there. Okay. It's clubcapital.co.com, and then / and there you are, right?
Yep.
Is that P2F? No, hang on. I'm gonna erase that. Here, we're just gonna do that, clubcapital.co for now.
There you go.
Okay.
That's how you find them, everybody. Darin Davis, thank you so much for coming on the Richer Geek Podcast. Everybody learn, get a hold of Darin, and find out something new about pref equity.
Yeah.
Everybody, thank you so much. And this concludes another episode of the Richer Geek Podcast. Take care.